Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning. We're going to give people just a couple more minutes before we get going here. You are in mute mode, but if you have any questions, just put them into the Q&A, and I have Wendy joining me, who's going to help with any questions. We are hoping this is going to be very conversational, which we'll get from our panelists as well. But feel free to ask any questions that you might have. So I'm really glad you're here today. I'm Michelle Marquis, and I have been in the vacation rental industry, as I say, more years than I'm going to admit, but it's been a very long time. I've raised two children through it. And I started as a property manager many years ago and then joined the supplier side where I worked for companies like Navis and TravelNet, Track Solutions, helped both those companies to some pretty fantastic exits. Started my own business just over 3 years ago, and I'm basically a fractional executive where I work with property managers and suppliers on all things that will help them grow their revenue quicker. So we have a strong panel with us today. We have three property management professionals who have real experience bringing in fractional leadership. So today's conversation is going to be practical, specific, and grounded in what actually happens when companies decide they need senior level support without immediately adding a full-time role. So what we're exploring today, at some point, many growing companies in the industry hit a wall. The business is moving, but something is not keeping up. Marketers may be reactive, sales may be too dependent on the founder, revenue management may be inconsistent or non-existent, finance reporting may not be giving leadership the visibility they need. And the answer is not always a full-time person. As a matter of fact, it might be that you either can't afford a full-time person or you need the results quicker than a full-time person could give you. So sometimes the better next step is a senior fractional leader who can come in for a defined period and a clear scope and help the strategy, systems, accountability the company needs to move forward. And before we get any further, let me introduce our three panelists. And Rachel Alday is with Abode in Park City, Sun Valley, and oh my gosh, Big Sky. Wow.
Jackson Hole, Jackson Hole.
Jackson Hole. Sorry.
Okay.
So Rachel, will you do a quick intro? Tell us what you manage and where your company is, your growth journey, that sort of thing.
Sure. So I'm Rachel Alday, and I have Abode Luxury Rentals with my husband, Rob. We have had this company for 18 years from when we started it from nothing. We started in Park City, Utah. We expanded about 13, 14 years ago into Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And then a little less than 3 years ago, we also expanded into Sun Valley. We manage about 200 homes across those three markets with about 140 something homes in Park City, maybe like 40, I can't remember how many, 40 something in Jackson Hole. And Sun Valley is like in the mid 20s right now. And yeah, we do luxury. So we have higher end properties that we manage. We have over 50 employees all year round, and we go up to 70 in the peak season. We do like 20 to 25 million in revenue per year. And we also do 1 to 2 million in concierge per year. So it's somewhat unique because it's luxury, but also kind of OG because we started back before Airbnb was anything of size and back when VRBO was like Craigslist. So yeah.
Thanks, Rachel. Jason, same for you. Who are you? What do you manage and what stage is your company in?
Yeah. So I've been in the business for 15 years. Uh, Maybe as opposed to Rachel, I'm in San Francisco when Airbnb was going crazy. There was a whole community and scene here in the Bay Area. So I was part of that scene, the growth of Airbnb, started managing properties in multiple different markets across the US. And I've been doing that for, gosh, last 15 years. But where we've seen the market and where we've seen the maturity of the vacation rental market in general, we want to focus now on more legacy vacation rental areas. So our focus is the Napa Sonoma area. So we still manage properties nationwide, but we've pivoted to focus and be not the biggest, but better quality in a focused geographic area.
Great. Fantastic. Thank you. My favorite destination. I think it's also Rachel's. Ari, on the supplier side, tell us what your company does and who you serve.
Sure. I got into the vacation rental business as a property manager actually back in '09 when HomeAway was a Craigslist and Airbnb like came to my office and I told them that I would never list with them because they don't pay me before the guest checks in and they don't allow me to communicate with the guest and own the guest relationship. And before I knew it, they accounted for more than 50% of my revenue. Uh, but approximately 6 years ago, I switched from being a property manager to becoming a supplier. Extenteam initially started as a talent arbitrage company, but now like we're the orchestration layer for over 95,000 units. We work with a lot of sizable companies and help them with their day-to-day operations, orchestrating guest communications, maintenance, leveraging hospitality trained individuals, plus our own AI platform.
Great. Thanks, Ari. And
Sure.
all three of our guests today, oops, I went the wrong directions. All three of our guests today um, have had either fractional or project work with executives, which is why we have them today. So, fractional leadership can mean different things depending on who is using the phrase. So, let's kind of level set. At its core, fractional leader is a senior leader operator who works within your company on a part time, project based, or retainer based for a defined period of time. The key distinction is this is they're not simply handing you recommendations and walking away. A strong fractional leader helps create the plan, build the system, define the metrics, support the team through execution. So they're not a consultant that just comes in and tells you what's wrong and then moves on. They really dig into the areas that you hire them for. And when we look at roles most relevant to short-term rental companies, we're usually talking about a few areas. Marketing, so brand, demand generation, direct booking, email content, homeowner acquisition, CRM, social media, trade show support. And when you talk to finance, and obviously, like you wouldn't hire someone like me for finance, just so we're really clear. But there are other fractionals that you would hire for finance that would help you with modeling and cash flows, reporting, forecasting, investor readiness if you're trying to get your business ready to sell. Revenue or sales, so that's sales process, channel performance, conversion, and growth planning. Operations could be systems, workflows, team structure, and accountability, and overall strategy, especially when the business is at an inflection point. For example, one of my clients, she's at 83 units. She has grown 40 units a year over 2 years, and then she's like, whoa, what am I doing? So she's clearly at an inflection point. Any of my panelists want to add to the different areas that you could hire somebody and what you've seen?
Right now, like we are in the process of hiring like a fractional resource for some sort of business transformation, essentially transforming like some of our clients from one business unit to another business unit. So I think like these kind of transformation projects or AI adoption projects could be one other area that could be
Yeah, AI
beneficial.
adoption is actually one of our members of Shortcuts, Heather Bayer. She focuses on AI adoption and the changes that come with AI. So that's a great example. Thank
And
you.
we use someone for company culture. So it's a consultant, but at this point it's sort of like it's like fractional HR, I guess, probably somewhere in that realm. And I think I don't know if that would be included on what you have for
Yep.
HR, but yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's very good. And they've been with you for year
7. I think it's 7
7
years.
years. Yeah,
Yeah.
so you could have a fractional that comes in that is literally along with your company for a long period of time, and that's a
Hmm.
perfect example because, Abode probably they could probably afford to hire an HR person, but not what they're getting with the full culture and the things that they get from the company they do business with on the HR side.
Yeah.
So the needs look a little different depending on whether you're a property manager or supplier, clearly. For property managers, fractional leadership can help a company when the company is strong in hospitality, but operations need a little more structure in marketing, revenue, finance, that sort of thing. And a fractional leader can help build the engine, create the plan, define the metrics, but then your team runs with it. I've worked with Rachel for the last year, and that's some of the stuff that I've done for her. And for suppliers, the need may be around a go-to-market strategy, a sales process, building a sales organization, positioning in the market, trade show. What trade shows do you go to, and then make sure you have good showing. And, so there's a fractional CMO or CRO can help build the playbook, create repeatable systems so the growth is not dependent on one person in your organization. And, frankly, to have a CRO or a CMO in your company is expensive, but that doesn't mean you don't want that skill level. So let's talk about timing a little bit. This is kind of one of the most important slides in the deck because fractional leadership only works when the company is ready to really use it well. I met with somebody recently where, I basically told her that I didn't want to be a person that came in, did an audit, and then she didn't do anything with it. So I wanted her commitment up front that when we worked on this project plan together, that she was actually going to make changes in her business because I want to have effect in a business. So some of the ready signals are clear. Growth has stalled. Key functions are reactive. Tools or trade shows are not producing clear ROI, or leadership is preparing for a new market, product launch, investment, or a sale. Many of those things are one-time things that you need shots, like a shot to get it ready. But readiness is not just about the business problem. It's also about the leadership being willing to share data, context, information, and decision rights. That's an important piece because if you hire somebody and you're not ready to be transparent and vulnerable of the good and the bad, it's pretty hard for someone to come in and make a difference in your business. The not ready signals matter too. If there's no budget for a meaningful strategic engagement, if the company really only wants task execution, or if the team is not prepared to meet regularly and act on recommendations, then a fractional leadership may not work for you yet. So looking at this list, and maybe we'll start with the property management side. Looking at this list, which ready signal felt most familiar when you first considered fractional support? And Jason, why don't we start with you?
Gosh, all the signs that you have there. This is a very good list, and it's on both sides. And I want to call it a double-edged sword because you go with all these ready signs, but then all of a sudden you start to touch on some of these not ready. I'll say once you engage in them. So it's a fun process, but I've used fractional for marketing. I'm working with Wendy. I've used it for operations, just having somebody come in and really consult on what we do. And then I've also used it as a sales manager also. So I think the list you have here is really, it's excellent. I think it's once you start engaging these services, once you've identified that you need them, then it's a point of working with different individuals and seeing if they're going to help you meet these goals. And if it's easy to feel like you're not ready, so you do have to dedicate time and commitment because it's easy to have all these ideas. But then if you start hitting the budget, you're not executing, you're not listening, then you're really not getting the value you need.
Good. Rachel, do you want to add anything?
Sure. So we started to look more heavily at fractional assistance as we were experiencing, we had some people on our team that maybe were having trouble reaching the level of execution that they were at. They were in director level roles and they were having maybe some trouble getting done what they needed to get done in those higher level roles. So we actually brought in Michelle and we had someone, come to help us with that. But then what happened is we ended up transitioning, where those people weren't working for us anymore and we needed to bring in new people. And so for me, the fractional help was really partially about that, like leadership is not ready to, maybe it's like the, where you're talking about like the share access and contacts that was sort of going on with our previous people that we had on the team. So I was wanting Michelle to help us with that. And then as we had new people, I think we were trying to get away from that, like marketing, sales, finance ops being reactive, and we were looking for help to like with these new people to help get them started in a way where they'd be proactive. And I think for us, like part of it was we knew we needed to move on a couple things, and we also ended up, getting switching to a new PMS and getting a new website. Just a few small things we were doing, and so, but you get stagnant as a company if you've been around for a while, and so it's hard to have changes. And even though we were making changes, I wanted to make sure we weren't going to do things the same old way. And I think sometimes bringing someone else in from outside the company can help get those moves to happen. Whereas, like maybe without bringing someone in, we would have stayed in our safe bubble in a bunch of small ways that would have led to like a bigger feeling of that. And having some outside assistance helped us to number one, get additional help that we needed through transition with PMS and website and stuff like that. And also to get some new processes in place with our new team members.
Thanks. So Ari,
Yeah.
from the supplier side, what was the signal that made you realize you needed more senior level structure? Because, I can think of at least four different roles that you have had over time that were fractional, that some worked, some didn't. But, what was the thing that made you realize you needed somebody outside your organization?
I think back in the day, like we were just hitting a plateau, like people were doing the same old thing, and I was not really successful as a leader when it came to change management. And that's when I seeked the help of fractional leaders. And now when I look it back, I also feel like one doesn't necessarily have to hit like a growth ceiling to seek assistance from a fractional, right? Maybe you want to self-inflict the change. AI adoption is a perfect example, right? Maybe your business is running just fine, but you want to future-proof it. Do you wait until the 11th hour when you see margins are shrinking and your competition is getting ahead of you because they're adopting AI and technology is better? Or do you like realize, you know what, I could use some help from like an AI transformation expert? I feel like those are like good use case scenarios to engage in help of some fractional leaders. And I'll tell one last thing. Like one other time where we engaged in some fractional help is when our head of finance decided to resign and leave the country, and travel the world. That's when I knew that I needed someone as like a stopgap measure for the upcoming 6 months until we hire someone and bring them up to speed.
Yeah, that's a really good example of when you would hire a stopgap professional because you know that you need the right person, but not any person is the right person. Only
Yep.
the right person is the right person. For any one of you, what business problem specifically did fractional leadership help you solve? And give us kind of the before and the after. What was going on before and what was going on after you hired the person? And I think you probably all have examples on this.
Yeah, I can start out. So, I mean, even what Ari was alluding to with for finance. So, operationally, we didn't have the right director of operations in place, and so I actually hired somebody that fractionally could do this, and they were excellent. They came in and consulted. I was used to our own operations, so I'd never really had somebody from the outside that had experience with 10 to 15 other country or companies and kind of consult on what best practices were. So they were supposed to be temporary until we found the right person. We finally found the right person, but we still kept them on because there was some value that they were able to add on an ongoing basis operationally. So they knew software well, they knew core operations. So that's worked out well. And then the other one I would say is marketing, which we work with Wendy. I interviewed several people for this position. Wendy stood out, and the results that we've gotten from Wendy have been great. She sees projects through. She's able to help us get the projects going. So that's worked out really well. I think the biggest takeaway I have from fractional services is I did this for so long on my own, figuring it out. And what I find great and amazing is that there's people now in the industry that are tenured, they have experience, they know what they're talking about, as opposed to trying to figure this all out yourself. So it's bringing a lot of best practices to my business, and it has made it a lot stronger.
I agree with
Right.
Jason. Like, to me, that's it might be kind of common, especially for people that have been doing this longer. We were all out here in like the desert making up how to do this on our own from those of us that started a long time ago before there was great software, before there were software options, right? Like our first software literally was a disk that was sent to us. So, like software has changed, right? Like the amount of tools have changed. Like the amount of people that are strategic and coming into this industry with investment and strategy versus a lot of us in the old days were like, oh, I'm going to manage these two houses, not even realizing like what the business could turn into. And so when you're starting something from scratch and you're starting from just a total like scrappy gritting it out, no big business plan or strategy behind you, you're just figuring it out every day and throwing spaghetti at the wall and making a million zillion mistakes and like essentially learning from doing it every possible wrong way and then deciding, okay, here, now we know the right way only because we did it wrong. Um, then you get to a point where now we're in this industry where there are a bunch of experts available to help. And so it's almost like kind of a shift in your brain where you have to realize, like, oh, there are people that can help me. And so for us, we had a team where we were really focused for all these years on hiring local people. And we operate in ski town so that there's not a lot of people around, especially not a lot of people that want to work. And so we would we would have a smaller pool of people to pull from, and we were fine with that. We would hire on personality, and then we would always just like train everyone, and that honestly did work well to a point, right? But as the business grew and we were approaching double digit millions and we were in revenue, and the whole thing was a bigger machine, we started to realize, and honestly it took me probably I'm one of the people that held it up and took the longest. I had these really strong feelings about these people that I knew, and I really wanted them to be able to rise up to where we wanted them to be. And so at first we brought in fractional help to help see if we could get the team that we had to get to the level where we needed them. And then what we found in some situations, and not all of them, some situations that worked, in other ones that didn't work. And so then we needed industry experts to help us realize, like, okay, this is where our leadership needs to be. And that these people that came in, they helped us, you know, they helped us with be part of our team to hold the business to where it needed to be in those different areas of the business. And then as we started to hire industry experts that maybe weren't local, but they were experts in that part of the business and they were working remote, and then getting those people integrated into the team and bringing them up to speed. And so to me, there was like all these different ways that fractional help can help us through that. So I think it could, like, to me, it's like it could help someone who doesn't have the current team members and they need to bring someone in to be that team member to a certain point. It helped us to, like, attempt to train some people to a certain level. And then it helped also to, find the right new people and then get those people started. I hope I'm making sense. I feel like sometimes I'm talking in a way that maybe doesn't make any sense, but
No,
maybe you're getting me. I don't know. Okay.
well, and what would you guys say, like what surprised you, good and bad? Ari, you
All
want to start this
Yeah,
time?
sure. So I'll start with some bad examples and then I'll
Yeah.
pivot to like some good ones. Like I've worked with some fractional leaders, like where, up until the signature was signed on the dotted lines, they were super engaged, like wanted the business. But then like once the business was theirs, like I was just another client. They weren't really hands-on, were they doing what they're supposed to do? Maybe partially, but they weren't necessarily part of the business, right? They weren't responsive to emails and Slack messages. I constantly had to drive the business forward. Whereas on the flip side, I work with individuals like Michelle who genuinely, like, despite being fractional, like, cared about the business as if it was their own business, like responding to emails and Slack messages in the odd hours of the night, like on a weekend, like knew the people, was part of the culture. So I think like if one is contemplating on whether to bring a fractional leader or not, I think it's really important to understand that person's working style or maybe work ethic. I'm not saying that the former examples that I gave that they lack the work ethic, but it just wasn't a good cultural fit, right? Like our company, we work fast, we're agile, so I don't want any fractional leader to hold us back because they're so busy with some other clients and they decided to bite more than they could chew. That's one word of wisdom that I would like to share.
Good.
Yep.
Anything else before I go on? Does anybody else have thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Uh, wha-
Go
One
on,
more
Ari.
thing, Jason. Sorry. Like, I think I got approached by like two fractional leaders that want to work with us, and they're both phenomenal people, like ex publicly traded company leaders, definitely successful individuals. But I think like we're at a stage where I don't need strategic advice. I just need people who like live and breathe Extenteam that are working 40, 50, maybe even 60 hours a week. So in that case, I know, you know what? It's not the right time of to bring in a fractional person who's who's only willing to work 20 hours a week. So I politely tell them, hey, listen, we're at different levels right now, like, in terms of pace, speed, what we both want out of life. So I think it's really important to gauge that as well, like understanding like how how passionate and how committed people are, like, and whether like they would be a good cultural fit for their company. And lastly, like we brought in some contrary to Rachel's experience, we brought in some people to help us with our culture and HR, and it was a part of my French. Well, let me select my words carefully. It wasn't a good fit because, in my opinion, culture needs to come within of the company, right? An external consultant coming in and dictating or like advising us on what our culture should be. I don't think that's the way to go. Now, like we have a physical office in Southern Florida where there's like an authentic culture, but it happened organically, right? People go to grab drinks after work, like it happened organically as opposed to someone imposing, oh, this the culture of the company should be A, B, and C. So those are my good and bad experiences.
Great. Jason, what did you want to add?
Yeah, I was just saying, good and bad. I think, when you're engaging these type of services or any, to me, I find this in all aspects of my business. Some things are going to work out and some don't. I need 80% of the things to work out. And if 20% don't, I need them not to be like devastating 20% that I'll call sink the ship. Before interviewing Wendy, I did have somebody, and I think, that I think it's similar to what Ari said. They wanted the business. I thought we were in sync. I said, okay, and we were just on the final step. We'd already talked about next steps, and I felt like, okay, we're moving forward. And then all of a sudden they kind of just it was like, oh wow, I think they wanted the business and to go after it, but I don't know if they actually wanted it. I think they had more fun with the chase. So obviously it didn't work out, and things work out for a reason. So I didn't put too much energy into it. I moved on, and Wendy and I've worked really well together. Something that Wendy's done really well, I think, for our business is she's really, and that's what I depend on her for, is to help push things forward, because the projects I have her working on, they kind of are they're in my peripheral, but they are very, very important. And that's where I start to slide off into the signs you're not ready, because it's easy to get when you're running a whole company. I've got my finger on too many things, but what she's working on is what I really want to be spending 90% of my day on. So she helps in that aspect. And I think one thing that's interesting, if you're looking at going into this fractional situation, there's a abundant of talent and knowledge that's out there. The next thing, I would say, I'm smart enough to know, I've had classes in marketing, I've had classes in all this stuff, but it's smart enough to know that, you know what, I need to bring somebody else in here that is much better at it than me. Because yes, if I had 8 Jasons, I think I could probably figure it out and do it, but I don't. And the bottom line is it needs to get done. And so that's where you've got to make a personal decision that I need an expert in here, and you're ready to listen to them.
It's good. That's
I
really
have
good.
a quick one, or
Yeah.
it's me,
No.
so I don't know how quick it'll be, but I'll try really fast. Okay, so to me, the piece about like not like a sign that you're not ready that you had on that list was like assigning tasks. And I think that was really a good lesson for me to learn is like maybe at some points I was sort of in this assigning tasks mode with different like fractional or consulting people. And it was good for me to realize like, okay, no, I really want to utilize these people's skills in a strategy and not just like it help me get these little things done. So I would say that was a mistake that we've made that we're trying to do better. And I would also say, Ari, to the company culture piece, so true. Like, I wouldn't want someone to come in and tell us what our culture is. I think finding someone who can be a consultant or a fractional part of your team. I think this applies not just to company culture, but to all of it. It could be marketing, it could be whatever. It's like you want someone who's going to come in and excavate with you, with your team, right? Like, so that's what our consultants do with company culture. They're always helping. We just did a new values exercise recently, but it was not about them telling us what our values are or what they should be. It was about work they did with our team so that the team excavates the company values, not even me and Rob, but our team is like doing work where they come like look at our current values and excavate, is that what they should be or should they change, and that kind of work. And I think that that applies with consultants or fractional, like across all areas of the business. When someone can come in and they're doing more excavation work sort of with you, like they are figuring out where your marketing strategy needs to be and helping you get there, or they're figuring out where your revenue management, strategy needs to be, not just telling you like this is what it should be, but understanding your business and how that should work. I feel like that has been a lesson. And then one other thing that was like a bad sign, I would say, was someone that we worked with is, and I think this is human and not like a statement about anyone in particular, but I think, a great fractional addition to the team or a great consultant is someone who can kind of understand the boundaries on like what their role should be and what they're good at. And then understanding what they're not, what is beyond their role. And also understanding what like maybe they're not good at. Because I have had someone we worked with who came in and in a lot of ways was really helpful, but then also created like a lot of drama just because they sort of were almost getting into like trying to be assisting with like HR type stuff. And like that became this, started this whole thing that then I had to clean up. And none of that was intentional, but I think it showed me like, okay, I need to find people to work with who understand like the boundaries of the, what they're going to be good at. And so that I'm not there like holding boundaries for them, but, letting them do the thing that they're good at and knowing that they're not going to, um, I don't know. Like it's hard, right? Like it's kind of a gray line because Ari, you said like you want someone to come in and like dive in and do so much, but then it's like that person has to understand as well, like what they're good at so that they're not just like trying to be jack of all trades and maybe,
That's right.
do good over here and mess up over here. Yeah.
Which is like leads us perfectly on like how
Oh,
to vet, hire, find, and even I think I talk about like scope of work and how to get clear on. I'm pretty sure I cover that, but this section is what many people are probably waiting for. And once you think you need a fractional, how do you find the right person, avoid an expensive mismatch? And there are five things I would focus on. And that is start with trusted referrals. So industry peers, advisors, the Shortcuts network can help you find people who already understand the space. Look for relevant experience, not just general leadership experience, and ask whether they have worked in vacation rentals, hospitality, technology, or like at a growth stage that's similar to where you are, or within business problems that are similar to what you had. And ask for outcomes, not titles. Anyone can say they led strategy or that they worked at Google, but what did they change? What grew? What got built? What was the company able to do afterwards because of their interaction? And confirm fit and capacity. How many clients are they supporting? How do they communicate? Do they communicate from 8 to 5, 2 days a week? Do they communicate via Slack, via email? Will they be available via chat? And start with like a 90-day sprint. And this is kind of what I do with a lot of clients, and this is what Rachel and I did is we define the scope, the KPIs, the decision rights, the meeting cadences, the reporting expectations. And we started with a 90-day kind of scope of work is what we started. And then it evolved from there. And vetting is harder than you think. Have any of you vetted someone and found that they didn't live up to your needs once you hired them? And what's the lesson you would share to make sure that someone selects the right person?
I mean, I feel like,
I'll go.
oh, yeah, you
Oh,
go first,
I'll
please.
go. So this is going to be a fun one. I'll have to see what I think. So I've had a couple situations where I've tried. I would personally like to limit the initial engagement. It's almost like dating, just to see if we're a good fit. Because I've gotten down the road with some where all of a sudden I've made this commitment on an agreement, and all of a sudden I realized very quickly, oh, this is not going to be the right fit. Luckily, we were able to come to some terms just to like, hey, let me take care of you. So I like a way to kind of get to know each other that doesn't put me into like a long term agreement. I've also had I think I'll go on with that. Is the other fun part of this is that it's easy with consultants to open the floodgates. I found a lot of great people to work with, but then all of a sudden you got to control costs, and as you're growing, so I like the ability to, if I find the right person to work with, I also like a little bit of flexibility in some of the terms, just because that's the whole beauty of a fractional
Yeah.
relationship. But I want something that works for both. So yeah, I think that also I found that Wendy or people in the shortcuts, you guys now have this community of resources. And I haven't reached out to a lot of your additional resources, but I'm going to guess that it's in your interest to have people that add value and that you want to be part of this team. So I'd love to, I think in the future, I'm going to be reaching out to you for other resources, and I'm going to hopefully trust that you guys have already vetted them to some extent and know that they're a good fit for your group.
Good.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I would
Terrific.
I would like to add, like, like, to echo what Jason said, like, if someone's asking for a 12-month or like 6-month contract, like, from the get-go, like, I personally would say run away, because they need to prove their like worth, right? Like,
Yeah.
like, maybe they're like they were amazing at a very similar company, but your communication style is not the same. The way you work is not the same. So do a small sprint, whether it's a 30, 60, 90-day sprint, doesn't really matter, with measurable outcomes, and then like increase the scope. That's what I would add as well. Also, one thing that I've learned the hard way is, like, always ask for references and actually pick up the phone and talk to those people. I wasn't doing that, so now it's like a hard learned lesson for me, whether it's like an employee, contractor, consultant. I always pick up the phone and have a conversation with someone who've worked with that individual in the past.
That's good. And
Mhm.
that's perfect. The red flags to watch for. One of them is no references, no relevant proof, examples of track record, um, you know, no clear results, metric, or personal impact. In other words, they're vague about outcomes that they've had, or they're vague about the outcomes of how they're going to report back. Like, you know, me, as far as like how I like to work with my clients, like I'd like to check in and kind of be graded. Like, here's what I said I was going to do. Here's what I did. How's it going? What else can I do? So that I make sure that I'm always adding value, and that look for that sort of thing. Also, a big retainer too soon. So, I have a client I just recently, I told her, this is the one that I said, if I'm going to work with you, I need a commitment from you that you're going to actually, like take the feedback and take actions. And I did an audit for her. I charged her for the audit that I did. But then what I did is I gave her a credit on the audit to working with me in the first 90 days. So that's a way to also test somebody out and to see if they're the real deal. But if they ask for a big retainer too soon, red flag. Strategy without accountability, no metrics, ownership, cadence, follow through. Those are all big things. Um, we've talked a little bit about all of your vetting processes. Is there anything else that you guys would suggest for when somebody's vetting?
I mean, something I've learned is that right now, because there's a lot of consolidation, there are like a lot of operators that are like selling and they're getting out, and then they're, making themselves available sometimes. Some people are as consultants. And I had like a little spree where I was kind of like talking to a lot of consultants out there because as a company, we had never done that. And so all of a sudden, things after COVID were so busy and then they slowed a little. So I wanted to take the time to strengthen the foundation of our business and like really look at how we did things. Were we doing it right? Should we reassess? So I was talking to a lot of people. And what I found is that sometimes when someone, they've exited a company and they did really well, and so they want to be able to offer that insight to people. And I do think that there is something positive to be gleaned from that. And I wouldn't say my experiences that way were totally negative because I think any conversation that you have with someone with experience in the industry, you're going to be able to learn something, and that's positive. But I also think like a lot of times what you're lacking in those scenarios are somebody with, it's more about like that strategy without accountability and maybe like vague outcomes, kind of like, I know a lot of stuff. I'm going to tell you what it is, but there's not really like, it's kind of like, take it or leave it. Let me tell you what I learned. And I think one thing to think about, I didn't think about this before, but it's kind of 2020 vision looking backward, is like, that the industry is changing, everything is changing all the time, and so what may have worked like at one point in the past, even a few years ago, may not work the same way, especially with LLMs and AI and all the things. And so it's like, I think it's good to have insight to that, because I think even for me as someone who's been in the business almost 20 years, I still was really open to talking to other people that had been in the business maybe even less time than me, but they did well with their exit. So I want to hear something and I want to learn. I think it's like, on the one hand, you can always glean something from other people if you try. But on the other hand, I think keeping a mind, keeping your head around the concept of making sure that you're working with someone without vague outcomes, or someone who can provide metrics and clear results and like a strategy with accountability. I think that that's really important. And I think now with consolidation, there's an opportunity where there could potentially be a lot of fractional options or consultant options that may be more about strategy without accountability and vague outcomes, because it's more about just sharing their input. And so I think it's good to understand the difference between a strategic fractional addition to your team or a strategic consultant versus just someone who's been here. I do think there's value in both, but I think there's more value when there's that strategy and accountability and less vague outcomes, right? Um, and I don't know if I'm being too vague right now, but anyway, I think I learned a lesson in that, right? And I think it's good for people to have an eye on it, since it's probably going to be a growth area in terms of fractional providers and consultants in our industry.
Good, 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 good. So we're thank you. We're coming up on time. So a few things, some key takeaways is that, first, fractional leadership gives companies access to senior level expertise without immediately adding full-time overhead. It's not a compromise. It's a smart way to bring in the right level of strategy at the right time. Second, don't wait for a crisis. Best time to explore fractional support is when growth has slowed and decisions are stacking up, or the next stage requires more discipline than you have currently in your business. And third, define success early. Strong engagements start with clear scope, KPIs, access to information, decision rights, what do they have a right to make decision, and regular cadence for accountability. Um, I've got a couple of questions from the audience, and I'm gonna answer them at the same time as I share this slide. And the one of them is, what's a realistic budget for a fractional CMO, CRO, CFO for an operational leader? So I'm gonna put that question out there for, what do you guys think a good budget is for that role? Obviously, it's going to depend on scope, but in general, if someone's looking for someone to take their company to the next level in an area of their business.
Something that would at least have 2x ROI would be my back of napkin answer.
Good. So when you say 2x ROI, you're going to look at the results of what you want from that person.
If I'm spending like $10,000 a month on a retainer, I want to get at least 20K in terms of revenue back to my business. And I get in my opinion, it's not going to happen overnight, right? The first month or first 2 weeks is going to be audit, but during the initial 3 to 6 months of the engagement, I'm hoping that the amount of money that I've spent would have doubled in terms of revenue back to the business. And for property managers, when I say revenue, I'm not referring to top line revenue. I'm referring to
Mhm.
management fees coming into my own property management company.
Any additional thoughts there? I have another question as well, and that is, what's the difference between a retainer and like why would you pay a retainer over contract work?
Well, like we pay a retainer, let's say like with the company culture, consultants that we work with, that's a retainer. Because to me, the reason I do that is there are specific meetings that we have with them and there are specific deliverables, but then there's also a lot of like ongoing availability that they have with our team. And so to me, that's the benefit of a retainer is that usually you're working in not only set meetings and set deliverables, but also some sort of additional over the top availability, whether that's like, meeting with whatever area of the company, like people on a certain team within your business or, availability to support the team in a more broad way. To me, that's the benefit usually of a retainer. Um, I don't know. That's how I've used it, I think.
I personally care about like the outcome, not necessarily about the hours that one puts in. So rather than like worrying about timesheets and going back and forth, I'd rather like have a seasoned leader like as on a retainer as opposed to working on an hourly basis.
That makes sense.
Jason, what about you?
Ooh, that's a tricky one. I was going to stay quiet about it. No, I'd say it's on a, when you talk about budget or any of these topics, I think it's really on a case by case basis. I have different people bringing different values. So I don't really have a rule of thumb. It's really what goals am I trying to achieve? And do I think this person's the right person? And what do we need to do to get it done? So I am more focused on the goals and I prefer to get these type of details ironed out sooner than later. I will tell you one thing that I like. Gosh, I will put it this way. A lot of the fractional services that I've used, I prefer personally not to so much look at a retainer. I want to like that person so much that I don't even think about the hours that they're taking. And I'm being very honest, I don't even want to look at the invoice sometimes at the end of the month because I just want to focus on what we're doing and what we're accomplishing. And so that's really what I've let kind of drive me. It may not be the most disciplined practice, but when that's your goal for your overall business and you're seeing the results, then that's what I focus on.
Good. Well, and I'll share with the audience from a fractional point of view. If I'm on a project basis, I really pay attention to the project and the scope of that project. So if something else comes up that I go, huh, that's interesting, we should talk about that. I don't pay as much attention to it because I'm focused on the project. They paid me to do it and, X amount of hours to get this done. When I'm on retainer, I then go, huh, well, you know what? I need to add that to my one-to-one with Rachel because that doesn't make sense, even though it's not part of our scope of work, because I'm thinking about her business more holistically than I'm on a project. And if I'm on a retainer, I also know, well, I'm not going to take more than X amount of clients on a retainer because, frankly, for me, I don't want to work more than that. You know what I mean? And so I know that it reserves that time for that client and I don't take other clients or take other projects. So that's how, as a fractional, and Wendy, we haven't included you in these conversations because you were my backup in case I couldn't get things going. But Wendy, Wendy, do you have any thoughts on this at all?
Yeah, absolutely. From a fractional leadership standpoint, because I've worked not only in the vacation rental property management side of the business, but I've also worked on the hotel side. So I've been a fractional, and when you look at the whole hospitality arena, I've been on both sides. And what I will say is kind of echoing what you said, Michelle, is that when you are on a retainer, you feel more invested, you feel more like you're a part of the entire team. Whereas if it's a project, it is sort of like there's a start and there's a finish, and there's components that you share with the client that you're going to accomplish, and you have your milestones, conversations of accomplishment, and then you're done. And so actually, I think what happens in a lot of cases is you may start out as a fractional leader in a project basis, and then that person likes what you did and they bring you on a retainer because they see that you have done such a great job with that one project and
Yeah.
they want to extend your expertise across other areas of the business. And that's what's happened to me a couple of times as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. I have the slide up. This is the shortcuts board. This is the consortium. So I've had this up a while, but you can kind of see that everybody in here, to Jason's point, we all do something a little bit different. And, this group was a hand-selected group by myself and Jeff Robertson when we first started this consortium. And Jeff has gone on to decide to do some other things, including some volunteer stuff. But in any one of these people can help you in different ways, and we can also reach out to any one of us, because if we can't help you, part of I see my value is my network. So it's not just these people here, but it's who else do I know that could help people, and that's part of kind of what I do. So a couple of things before I want to let you go. We have put together a fractional leadership readiness checklist. It's a practical tool to use to assess where your company is and what kind of support may make sense. The link will be included in the follow-up email after today's session. Second, mark your calendars. I don't have a date, but just keep aware that in August, we're going to do a webinar series to how to make a trade show work. So this is going to be both for property managers. When you're deciding to go to a trade show, what should you take into consideration? How should you use the time that you're going there to get the ROI for your company, frankly? But also, if you're a supplier and you're attending a trade show, how do you make sure you get the most of your time there? And finally, thank you to my panelists. You guys were generous with your time, your experience, and your candor. I so much appreciate it. And if attendees would like to connect with any of you, we'll include LinkedIn profiles in the follow-up email that we'll send. So, on behalf of Shortcuts and our entire panel, thank you for being here today, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you
us,
all.
Thank
We
you
Michelle.
for
really
having us.
appreciate you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Bye, thanks.